Should Christians be afraid of America's future? That is the question we will explore today. Welcome back to Liberty's Hill, where we explore how can we create a world of human flourishing with liberty, justice, dignity, and prosperity. I am Dr. Bill Brannan, a pastor in Liberty Hill, Texas. Recently, I heard a North Korean who came to America explain how he never knew what liberty was until he came to the U.S. He thought North Korea was pretty good until he experienced America and had something to compare it with. As I was thinking about this, I realized that people can flourish in less than ideal conditions. There are more genuine Christians right now in China than all of the rest of the world put together. They live under a totalitarian state, yet they have peace and joy in Jesus Christ. Almost every day I run into people who are afraid that America is heading toward tyranny. My concern is that when we give in to fear, we become part of the problem rather than the solution. I've had the privilege of visiting many countries and have seen humans flourish in hostile environments. They have meaningful friendships, laughter, and a deep appreciation for life. They do not let their circumstances keep them from living well. We need to remember that the Church of Jesus Christ was birthed in the greatest totalitarian state the world has ever seen. One element of the gospel is to transform a world of tyranny into a world of liberty, and this is done by people who learn to flourish regardless of the state of the world they live in. Jeff Myers relates a story that describes this well. Ernest Gordon's To End All Wars is a moving example of how Christians can shape culture even amid unimaginable circumstances. Gordon was a prisoner in one of the cruelest places on earth, a squalid and terrifying World War II Japanese prison camp called Chunkai. Chunkai was filthy, disease-ridden, and inhumane. Prisoners frequently died from starvation, disease, overwork, beatings, shootings, beheadings, or hopelessness. One man, Dusty, was mockingly hung on a tree to die like the savior he professed. Deprived of their humanity, the prisoners adopted a beastly survival of the fittest mindset. Death meant nothing, and life meant little more. Gordon, a member of the elite Scottish Highlanders, described it this way. Death called to us from every direction. It was in the air we breathed, the food we ate, the things we talked about. The rhythm of death obsessed us with its beat, a beat so regular, so pervasive, so inescapable that it made Chunkai a place of shadows in the dark valley. But two events, according to Gordon, changed everything. First, word spread of a prisoner who, in the name of Christ, offered his own food and stayed by the side of his bunkmate to nurse him back from the brink of death. His bunkmate survived, but he did not. In the second incident, a guard threatened to randomly execute the prisoners serving a work detail until someone confessed to stealing a missing shovel. A Christian stepped forward and confessed, saving the lives of the others. The enraged guard beat the man, crushing his skull. The others watched in horror, helpless to assist the man who had given his life for theirs. A later recount showed no shovels missing. From a purely pragmatic viewpoint, these deaths were a foolish waste. But in the camp, they led to a new attitude of you first rather than me first. Christian volunteers changed gangrenous bandages and bathed hideous wounds. Life regained some of its meaning. Even the experience of death changed as prisoners stopped piling bodies, instead electing chaplains to conduct honorable funerals for the fallen. Out of this restored humanity grew a stunning culture. The prisoners formed a library and taught courses in everything from math to philosophy to languages, 9 of them. They staged plays. Having retrieved 6 violins from a vandalized relief shipment, they formed an orchestra and held concerts. The overall camp conditions hadn't changed. Frightful diseases still claimed lives. Food was still scarce and nauseating, but the culture had changed. Sacrifice had brought meaning out of misery. Gordon wrote, Death was still with us, no doubt about that, but we were slowly being freed from its destructive grip. We were seeing for ourselves the sharp contrast between the forces that made for life and those that made for death. Selfishness, hatred, envy, jealousy, greed, self-indulgence, laziness, and pride were all anti-life. Love, heroism, self-sacrifice, Sympathy, mercy, integrity, and creative faith, on the other hand, were the essence of life, turning mere existence into living in its truest sense. These were the gifts of God to men. What Gordon described was culture. He and a handful of others refused to accept the environment that had been forced on them. Despite their horrifying conditions, they were able to shape something beautiful. Along the way, they transformed a place of hatred, cowardice, and greed into a place of love, heroism, and self-sacrifice. It is amazing to me that Gordon could say that in Chung Kai they experienced living in its truest sense. When we study history, we discover that people have faced far darker days than we are today, and they flourished. We often let the fear of what the future may bring cause us to fail to live in its fullest sense today. The good news is that if a culture in Chung Kai could change, so can ours when we reconnect with the faith and values that create human flourishing. For Gordon, the culture change only affected the prisoners. The prison camp is an example of a larger culture that also needs to change. The history of missions has shown barbarian cultures that practiced human sacrifice and even cannibalism completely transformed through the gospel. If those cultures can be transformed, so can ours. But it begins with people who are culture changers, like it did in the prison camp. In a culture where people who have developed wisdom and virtue can be cultural leaders, there is hope that nations can be transformed, and that is true in America today. We are at a crossroads as a nation, and our future will be determined by the faith and values of our people. Our founding fathers understood that our form of government only works for a moral and religious people. If we fail to be that type of people, then we are no longer suited for our form of government. As people lose wisdom and virtue and are governed by their appetites, they begin treating people inhumanely. It is a rebarbarism of culture. When people are irresponsible and barbarous, they need the heavy hand of government to keep them in line. When people are virtuous and self-governing, they can handle the responsibilities of liberty. History has shown that tyranny is better for people than anarchy. Both tyranny and anarchy create a world of unnecessary inhumanity, but it is worse under anarchy. Our goal is to create a world of liberty, but it can only be created by enculturating people into the faith and values that are foundational to human flourishing. Regardless of the form of government, people suffer when inhumanity flourishes. That is what is amazing about Chung Kai. When the prisoners reconnected with the faith and values of liberty, they flourished even under one of the cruelest cultures imaginable. The point is that regardless of how degenerated a culture is, transformation begins with people. And when people learn to flourish, it begins to change all of culture. The 10 great persecutions of the early church were cruel and inhumane, but the faith and values of human flourishing caused believers to live in its fullest sense and caused many people to embrace the faith as they witnessed the life of believers. As Christians, we do not need to be afraid of the future of America. We just need to live in its fullest sense and be the catalyst for cultural change. The good news is that we can transform our culture if we begin to live well today. We have to turn away from fear and embrace faith, hope, and love if we're going to avoid a culture of tyranny. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe to my channel.